Welcome everybody to our webinar today. We're very excited and thrilled to have our special guest, Dr. Bruce Pearson, presenting Inspire Excellence in Your Young Band. Before I introduce Bruce, just want to share just a couple of little housekeeping things about how the webinar will work. So first of all, there will be handouts related to this, which you will find will be placed in your chat. So feel free to go ahead and download those from the chat area. And then also we're going to have both the chat and the Q&A functions operating during the webinar. So what we'd like to do is just keep the Q&A section of this simply for that questions that you would like Bruce to address. If you want to talk about something else, contact or a comment to a friend or a colleague, please do all that kind of stuff in the chat. Or if you want to provide some feedback, anything like that, put all those kind of things in the chat and just leave the Q&A section purely for questions you might want to ask and have Bruce address. And I'll be monitoring that as we go through. And if it seems appropriate to have Bruce deal with a question in the moment, we'll arrange for that to happen. Otherwise, we'll try and collect logical groups of questions that might address similar issues, collect those all together and have Bruce address them at the end. So one of those two things hopefully will cover most of any questions you might have. Okay, so that's just the housekeeping aspect. Now, without further ado, it gives me a great deal of pleasure as the current national president of ABODA to introduce Bruce Pearson. And for many of you here in Australia, if you're here in Australia watching this, Bruce really doesn't need an introduction because he's been here, as he tells me, almost 25 or more times to Australia, and most of us have probably had some wonderful experiences working with Bruce in workshops, etc., during some of those times. But just in case, I'm gonna do some introduction here anyway. So Bruce is very well known as the author of terrific method books, Standard of Excellence, Tradition of Excellence, and even going back to Best in Class in the very early days. And he's also co-author on Excellence of Jazz Ensemble and the Standard of Excellence of Jazz. He's well known also as a composer of many educational works for school ensembles. He's received many highly regarded awards, Excellence in Education Award, the Midwest Medal of Honor, and for us here in Australia, who's the very first patron of our Maryborough Music Conference, which is one of our major music conferences that's held in Maryborough, Queensland, every 2 years. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Bruce to deliver this webinar for everybody. Thanks, Bruce.
Well, I hope you can hear me, and I want to give my thanks to the ABODA and also to the folks at chose for organizing this workshop, and a special thanks to you for attending it, and also to my friend Rob McWilliams for hosting our event this day. Well, thanks again for attending our workshop. What we're going to do is we're going to be covering numerous things. But first and foremost, I want to say that creating a culture of excellence is our job one, the most important thing that we can do in our classrooms. And it really starts with the very first lesson. And one of the things we as directors have to determine is what are we going to be teaching at that very first lesson. Well, for me, it's hands down the easy decision, and that is the concept of tone and tone quality. So tonight, or today actually it's tonight here in Minnesota, but today we're going to talk about getting a great start with your beginning band students. We're going to talk some about how to teach students how to read music, and then we're also going to talk about how we can do enrichment activities. So hopefully you'll find this helpful and things that you can take right away to your classroom. As we talk about tone and tone quality, the first major topic we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the three major components of it. And the three major components of creating a good tone are air, embouchure, and a good model. As I talk about a good model, I'd like to suggest to you that you can provide the model as in-person instruction, or you could have a colleague who plays that instrument come in or to demonstrate it, or also to part of what we call our IPS, or Interactive Practice Studio, provides just really a great sense of what a good tone sounds like on the major instruments in a band. But let's get started with some really practical things. First and foremost, we're going to talk about, again, tone. So under tone, we talked about air, we talked about embouchure, and we talked about a model. But I'd like to right now focus our attention and unpack some ideas about how to teach good air. And the first of that is posture. Now, it goes way beyond more than just looking good. Posture can either make or break good breathing, which can make or break good tonal development. So first and foremost, I teach my students to sit way forward on the edge of their chair, so far forward that there's weight on their feet. We do that so that we can relax the abdomen area. And I want them to sit nice and tall and straight with their backs obviously away from the back of the chair, but their backs straight as well. Chin parallel to the floor. Now, as I say that, I just want to remind you too that when we get into our band rehearsals, that so many of the kids play with their stands too low. I have found that the best way to teach the students to have proper stand height is to ask them to point their finger at their very first note on their musical page, and then to adjust their stand so that finger is pointing at my hands as their teacher / conductor. So again, we're sitting up tall and straight, my back is nice and straight, weight on my feet, chin is parallel to the floor. I also like to get the kids in the habit of keeping their elbows each at a 45-degree angle, so that it really creates a nice 90. And we're going to talk more about this as we talk percussion, but elbows should be at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. So that's posture. The next part of teaching good air or breathing is to teach them how to inhale. And for that, what I like to do is have a number of ways of teaching them how to breathe correctly. However, most of my teaching now is done in honor bands, and to teach good breathing, and when I have to do it in a hurry, I simply ask the kids to silently inhale the word how, H-O-W, like this. And if you'll notice, I turned it right around because I don't want to hold it in my throat, because if I hold it in my throat, I have to close it. So again, I'm inhaling, and I'm inhaling the word how. If you have your students do it that way, they can't do it correctly. So now we have posture, we have the inhale. Now we're going to move on to the exhale. And for that, I ask the students to take a small piece of paper and ask them to draw a target on it. Having the target is critical, because if I were to simply have them inhale and then blow, they'd go like this. But what I want them to do is I want them to be able to hit the target. And when they hit the target, it goes like this, because it focuses the air. So right from the very first lesson, we're teaching the students to focus the air by hitting the target. Sometimes I'll have the students see how long they can hold the paper against the wall with their arms at arm's length, and just with their air holding the paper against the wall. But I ask them to hit the target. So now we have the three major components of air. Posture, just to review, on the edge of your chair, back straight, weight on your feet. Inhale, thinking of the word how, H-O-W, and exhale, hitting the target. Those are the three ways that we teach air. Next, of course, comes the business of the embouchure. And for that, what I'm going to do is demonstrate the embouchure on three instruments with applications for other instruments that you'll actually see in the handout when you use it. And those three instruments I'm going to demonstrate on are flute, clarinet, and trumpet, and obviously implications to the other brass instruments, and the clarinet implications to the other single reed instruments. So we're going to start with flute. Let's start right away. So the first thing I ask all of my students to do is to have a mirror and put the mirror on their stand. Some schools allow phones like this, some don't, but if your school allows it, you might even want to have the kids take a selfie once we produce the embouchure so they can see what we're trying to produce. So once we have that, I then ask my students, I'm talking flute now, I ask my students to hold their arm at a 90-degree angle in front of them, and I'm going to ask them, by keeping their head nice and still, to move the air up and down their arm without moving their head. I'll get close to the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Now the reason for that is that I want to teach jaw flexibility, because that's an important part of being able to play flute. Now I'm going to turn to the side just a little bit and notice that I ask my students to have their jaw forward. Watch it like this. I have a bit of an overbite, so I have to push a little further, and I do it that far forward so that the lower lip is right below the upper lip. So again, I worked on the jaw flexibility, and I have them push their jaw forward. And then what I do, once they're able to do that, I have them say, and their jaw forward, 2 syllables. Hold the first syllable while you say the second. The first is the word whee, W-H-E-E, and the second syllable is to, T-O-O. So again, it'd be whee, to, whee, to, whee, to. You might want to try that. It works really, really well. Subsequent to writing these books, a wonderful flute teacher said, you know, Bruce, that works fine too, but let me tell you how I teach my flute students, and I have them just simply say the word beautiful, beautiful, and then stop at the end of the first syllable, beau, and that's another way of teaching a good flute embouchure. So now they're going to look into their mirror, and they're going to look into or their selfie, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that they look at their embouchure, or let's say at the aperture actually, and making sure that it looks like let me just say an American football, somewhat oblong. So if you can look at I'm going to produce one for you. Whee, to. Now that's a pretty good aperture for that. They need to look at that. If it's too flat, you want them to say more to. If it's too round, you want them to say more whee. So that's the way we create that really great looking aperture. The next thing I do is I ask them to take their right index finger and put it under their lip as if they are holding the head joint, and I ask them to whisper the word to, remember, jaw forward, over their finger. And what I want them to do is to see where the aperture is. Once they're able to do that, I then ask them to take their head joint, and with their head joint, I want to have them close up one end. I want them to feel the opening with both lips, roll it down, and play a note. Head joint, of course, parallel with the lips. Jaw forward, covering approximately a third of the hole and playing that note. That note should be a concert second space A. Then I have them remove their hand and play. And that should be an A, an octave higher. Now, you're going to experience what I experience, and that sometimes the kids don't play a good A. Listen. Here's a flat A, but it's also a very poor tone. And so if it's flat, you want to roll it out until they can get a good sound. If it's sharp, they're going to roll it in. So that's the way we adjust it to make sure that we're getting an A on their head joint. Now keep in mind this, and we're going to go through this with the other instruments too. The pitch that they play on the head joint, or with clarinet, mouthpiece, and barrel, or the saxophones with the neck and the mouthpiece, the pitch that they play will determine their tone quality. So that's what we're trying to achieve. That's what we're trying to work on. Now, once you're able to do that, what I ask them to do is to check in the mirror to see what it looks like so they can replicate it when they go home to practice. Now, once we're talking flute, once they're able to get a good sound, and we've taught them how to hold the flute, which is another, if we had more time, I ask them now to open up their books, and we're going to have them open up their books to Tradition of Excellence, page number 4. And as we do that, what I'd like them to see is that there are 3 ways, 3, should we say, environments to teach kids how to play. It's absolutely critical that they play on starting on the note that's best for that instrument. So if you're teaching a flute lesson, a private flute lesson, or a sectional flutes, then I'd want them to start on page 4. Those notes are B, and then going down to A and G. We'll talk more about that later, but if you'll notice, up in the top hand, right hand of the page, we're going to show the fingerings, and then we're going to have a splash of color as we the first time it's introduced down there. If, however, you're teaching them in let's say a sectional of woodwind players, flutes, clarinets, saxophones, you will want to skip page 4, and you'll want to go and have them play page 5. Now keep in mind that whenever you get away from a private lesson situation, you have to make some compromises. However, the compromises must never jeopardize good hand position or good tonal development. So page 4 for like instruments, page 5 for sectionals, and then page 6 for the whole band comes together. The purpose of pages 4 and 5 is to bring everyone together for their starting note on page number 6. Absolutely critical that they start on the note best suited for them. Now let's move ahead, and we're talking only about the embouchure. And so what I'd like to do now is to move on to the clarinet. And so for clarinet, what I'm going to do is I teach from using just the mouthpiece and barrel. And the first thing that I do is I ask the students to take that same sheet of paper, remember the one that we drew a target on, and I'm going to ask them, by the way, you experienced teachers know, if you're teaching a class of beginning clarinet players, the first lesson, if you're very successful, will be able to get the read on correctly, and that's always a challenge. But once that's done, mouthpiece and barrel, take the same sheet of paper that I was using to demonstrate the exhaling or blowing, and then I have them slide the paper behind the reed until it comes to a stop. And then at that point, I ask the students to then put their thumb right under, first of all, draw a line connecting the left side of the paper to the right side of the paper, because that's where we're going to put a thumb, because that's the exact spot where the lower lip must go. So once we're able to get the paper in place, slide behind it, and we find that line, I ask the students to put their thumb right below that line. It's hard for me to demonstrate that, but right below that line. Their thumb becomes kind of the bumper, the stopper. And so what I do is I ask the students, once their thumb's in place, to shape their mouth just like we did for flute, and that is shape your mouth and say whee two, whee two. Top teeth on the mouthpiece, and we have the mouthpiece in. Their lower lip goes right against their thumb. Whee two, whee two. They of course have to inhale and then blow through the on the mouthpiece and barrel. That pitch needs to be a concert F sharp, top line F sharp. Any other pitch other than that, and we'll have something other than a very good traditional sound. Now remember this, that the clarinet is what we refer to as a stand-up embouchure, a firm lower lip. And that's going to be in contrast to the saxophone, and I'll just address that briefly in this session. Stand-up embouchure, and they're going to play a note, that concert F sharp. And if they can play with a good concert F sharp, it's also the reason that some kids have trouble playing in the upper register. With that concert F sharp embouchure, it solves most of your upper register problems on the clarinet, also creates a gorgeous sound. Now listen, let me show you something what happens. Here's F sharp, the sound we should produce. Here's an E, and most of your beginning clarinet players are going to be playing an E. And so it'll come out like this. And when they play something other than that concert F sharp, here's the type of tone quality they get. We've all heard that way too often. So how do we fix it up? Remember, the kid's got kind of a sick tone, you agree with that, and you've got to fix it up. Well, how do you do it? And so for them, if they're playing too low, you're going to have them to say, ooh. Now, ooh, don't tell them to tighten their embouchure. Just say ooh, because when they say ooh, it brings the corners in, and like a drawstring or like a rubber band around the mouthpiece, and it's equal pressure all the way around, and because we don't want to put pressure, too much pressure on the reed. So have them say ooh, and it'll bring it up. So again, here's the E. And it changes the tone quality from. And remember this, you can't tune a poor tone, because you must start with a good tone in order for it to be able to play in tune and also to create a good sound. Now, I'm going to come back a little bit later because I'm going to address a lot of things with that. And in your handout, you can see the pitches that we're recommending that be played in the case of your alto clarinet. It's mouthpiece and neck, and make sure the mouthpiece is all the way in. Again, slip the paper behind, just like we did on the B flat clarinet. And then the pitch that they should play is a concert B. Now, most of your clarinetists are going to be playing too low. So one of the techniques that I use with my students is I have them take, and I provide for them, a swizzle stick. I know none of you Aussies don't know what a swizzle stick is, but I give them a swizzle stick and have them shape their embouchure. And little by little, it strengthens the muscles so they can say ooh to bring it up to the right pitch. I'll do the same. I do the same on for the brass players as well. Now, the next thing I do, or I should say, we've talked about the B flat clarinet. Alto clarinet is third line B, and the bass clarinet is D flat, just below the staff. And again, you'll probably have to work to bring them up to pitch. A number of years ago, I was invited to go to Japan and train Japanese band directors and on how to teach students right from the beginning. And I was given a 45-piece band, and with a typical, it was a middle school band, 45-piece band with typical middle school instrumentation. I think I had 18 alto saxophones, and they all had that beginning alto saxophone sound, the sound that'll part your hair from about 30 feet away. But then I said, well, let's take your mouthpiece off, or your neck off, and played it on the mouthpiece and neck, and they had this sound, and you've probably heard it far too often. And I said, well, that's interesting. I love the word interesting because it's so non-committal. And so what I said to them, let's do this. Let's find the middle point on the cork of your neck. Draw a line there. Put your mouthpiece on right up to that line, and then we're going to play a pitch. Every one of them played a pitch too high. And so the pitch that they played was an A sharp, and what we really want to play for your alto saxophones is a second line G sharp. Now, I talked earlier about the clarinet having a firm lower lip. The saxophones have a softer lower lip. Years ago, when I started as a clarinet player, and then I transferred and played mostly saxophone from then on, and I felt I couldn't get playing the lower register of my saxophone well. Plus, the upper register was terribly sharp. So what I did is I went and went to a professional who told me, no, you're taking your clarinet embouchure with you to the saxophone. So remember, while they're similar, very different, particularly the lower lip. A softer lower lip, which more flesh against the a reed, which reduces some of those high frequencies, and so you'll want them to play a G sharp, your alto saxophones. Now, to do that, you simply have them shape their mouth more O. Remember, clarinet was oo, saxophone more O. So then tenor saxophone and baritone saxophone do it exactly the same way, but their pitches are bottom line E, and we're often running in that way. Rob?
Yeah, this might be a good time we've had a question about reed strength for beginner students.
Sure.
Maybe you could talk about that across all of the single reeds.
Sure. One of the challenges in talking about reed strength is that it's difficult. Excuse me, just a minute. It's hard to talk about reed strength. You can't talk about reed strength without apart from a mouthpiece. But let's make an assumption that they're playing a student model clarinet. Let's play it with the mouthpiece that comes with the student model clarinet. I start my kids on a 2.5, and and there's other brands who have corresponding strengths and stuff like that, and that's stronger than what some teachers start with. The reason I do that is it requires them to develop their embouchure in order to bring to be able to produce a good tone and play it in tune. Did that answer it? Hopefully it did. Any other questions, Rob?
No, that's it for now. I'll just pop in when if you see my video start, you'll know there's a question to deal with.
Okay. Well, once we're able to produce a good sound on clarinet, we'll want to, on their mouthpiece and barrel, and show them how to hold it. The next thing we'll want them to do is to be able to start on the right note for them. And for that, we're going to open up our Tradition of Excellence books. Again, there's 3 environments. You can have a like instrument start, a sectional start, or you can have a full band start. So if you start them in a like instrument class, I'd start them on page number 4. Notice the notes are E, D, and C. And then sometimes you need to start them in a section. So if that's the case, I skip page 4 and start them on page number 5. And notice the notes there. Again, E, F, G, and still really good notes for them to start on. Again, the fingering is up in the top right-hand corner, and then we put a splash of color through it the first time it's used. and that's true throughout the book. And if they start in a full band setting, and sometimes we need to do that, then we start on page 6. And so again, notice those notes, the E, F, and G, just like we had on page number 5. Again, whenever we get away from like instrument start, we have to make some compromises, but again, it must never jeopardize them getting off to a really a great start. That having been said, what I'd like to do now is move on to to a brass instrument, and for that I'm going to pick on trumpet. Rob, do you have a question?
Yeah, just before you leave the woodwinds, someone's asked if you feel it's valid to have students play short pieces in an ensemble setting only on their mouthpieces, or you know, that starts setup.
Thank you. What we've done in Tradition of Excellence, and it's really a great question. What we've done is we've created, and it's found on page 3 of all of the students' book, a little blues progression where they on that particular key. So, for example, on clarinet, we were saying a concert F sharp was the best pitch for them. So we've got an F sharp blues progression for them to play so that they can develop that embouchure. I think they'll find that to be really helpful.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah. Let's move on to the brass instruments. And the first thing that I do is I ask my brass players to take their mouthpiece and put the shank in between their teeth, not lips, teeth. And there's about 4 reasons I have them do that. First of all, it keeps their teeth apart, which we as brass players know is vitally important. Keeps the throat open, equally important. What it does is, notice if you do this right, when you remove the mouthpiece, it creates the start of a great embouchure. And so we got teeth apart, throat open, starts to form an embouchure, and the 4th reason is the kids quickly learn to keep their mouthpieces clean. They don't want that grubby thing in there. So the next thing I do is I then take the paper, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow against and hit the target. Inhaling, remember posture, inhale, exhale, hit the target. And it's been my experience that most beginning brass players don't use fast enough air. And to demonstrate, to see if they're using fast enough air, I take a ping pong ball. I'm blowing out, I'm not sucking in. And if they're using fast enough air, it'll hold the ping pong ball in place. If they aren't using fast enough air, watch. The ball falls to the ground. The kids get a kick out of it, and it creates a wonderful way to make sure they're using fast enough air. Now, once they're able to do that, what I do is I ask them to moisten their lips. I ask them to shape their mouth one of 2 ways. Either IM or OM. Both have advantages. Both have some disadvantages. But I personally use OM. So I moisten their lips and I have them shape their mouth OM. And then I ask them to bring their OM and lightly bring their lips together OM. And then to blow them apart, creating that buzz. Now, once they're able to create the buzz, I'm certain that I want to encircle the buzz with the mouthpiece. And for all instruments, with the exception of French horn, it's going to be, and I'll turn here just a little bit, half upper lip, half lower lip. For French horn, it's going to be 2/3 upper, 1/3 lower, like this. I forgot to mention, people often ask when I do the ping pong ball trick, does it work on French horn? Yeah, momentarily. As soon as you get off center, it doesn't work so well. And for trombone, euphonium, again, same thing. It works for a while until you get it off center. And for tuba players, we usually use a bowling ball. And if they can hold a bowling ball in place, man, you have got a tuba player. So once we're able to do that, we've created now the buzz on that. Now I've talked about the pitch that they should play on their mouthpiece and for all of the other instruments. I pull the tuning slide, and so I pulled the tuning slide. By the way, that has another advantage, and that is they have to keep it lubricated. Put the mouthpiece in, and the pitch that they should play should be a D or an E flat. D just below the staff, or an E flat bottom line. Either one of those work out just fine. Now, here's the difference between the woodwinds and the brass players in Tradition of Excellence and Standard of Excellence. So let's open up the trumpet book to Standard of Excellence, Tradition of Excellence. Sorry about that. Hang on. I'm going to slide this in a little further. There we go. And let's open to Tradition of Excellence, page number 4 and 5. It's vital that kids start their very first note to be the best note for them on that particular instrument. But in addition to that, it's vital that each child starts on the note that's best suited for him or her. So what I do, if you'll notice, I dropped the tennis ball, or the ping pong ball, sorry. I ask them to play a note. If you'll notice right in the middle of the page, there's that green section that says, what do you hear? And so what I'm going to do, there's even a little speaker there to play the note. I'm going to ask the kids to play a note without pushing down any valves. So I'm going to ask them to play a note. And if they play that note, I'm going to say, let's start on page number 4, because that becomes their most natural starting note, and for those kids. So then the notes, if you'll notice, go C up to a D and finally to an E. You're going to say only 3 notes? Yes, because that's all kids can assimilate from the very beginning, is 3 notes at a time. I've seen some books where they'll have as many as 5 notes, and then the kids are really scrambling to remember all those fingerings. Now, so if they start with this note, sorry, they're going to start on page number 4. Whereas if they start on this note here, they're going to start on page number 5. So if you'll notice there, if they can start on page number 4, they start on a C, and then a D and an E. If they start on the G, it's G, F, and E. And also, too, keep in mind that those pages 4 and 5 can be played simultaneously. So in your brass section, you might have a group of students who can start on page 4, another group can start on page 5, and you can be really efficient with your time, because you could say, play number 1, everybody play number 1. Play number 2, everybody play number 2. Now, that brings us, excuse me here just a minute. In each and every case, the notes bring us to the starting note on page number 6. So if they start on page number 4, it's C, D, E. If they start on page number 5, it's G, F, E. And so in other words, it brings everybody to the starting note with the full band. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. I'm going to now shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about starting percussion. Oh, one last thing before I go. I mentioned I was going to share with you how I teach articulation, or as some people say, tonguing. It's the only thing that I teach fast before slow. And the reason for a fast before slow is a fast tongue is a small movement tongue, and it also automatically puts the tongue in exactly the right place. So for example, I will start in and have the students and have them whisper and copy me. Hopefully you can hear that. Whispering. And then I have them put it on their instrument. And then slow it down. And I do that for all of the instruments. I do want to mention and start with a little bit of percussion instruction. And, well, first of all, I'm going to just get the, well, maybe I should show the grip first. Before I pull the practice pad in place. I teach match grip, and I feel very strongly about that. And the reason for that is that the match grip is the basic grip for all of the percussion instruments. See, percussionists need to know how to play from 5 families of instruments: drums, mallets, timpani, auxiliary percussion, and drum set or drum kit. What I'm going to do is think about dividing and talk about the grip. The grip is analogous to the embouchure for the wind players, but I'm going to divide the stick into thirds. Then I have them draw a line using a Sharpie, and then I ask them, that's the fulcrum, tell them that's where the fulcrum is. Then I'm going to have them make a cross with that line, and my first knuckle. Some teachers teach this, but I find that you lose control. Right up here is what I think works best. And so they cross that and then put their thumb directly opposite. These other fingers work as a guide. Thumb goes right down the shaft. And because it's matched grip, we're going to do exactly the same with the other. Now, what I'm going to do is go from there to grabbing my practice pad. And the practice pad or the drum should be in position so it's about just a few inches below their waist. Weight comfortably on both feet. And then I like to have my drum angled down ever so slightly. And then I make sure that my elbows are at a 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them strike the center of the just off center, I should say, but right above the snare, which of course is on the bottom. And then they're going to raise their sticks about 8 to 12 inches, and so on and so forth. Now, the motion that I like to teach the students is that it should be a feeling of bouncing a ball. Sometimes if students have difficulty getting that feel, I'll actually bring a basketball and have them do that so that it's not too much wrist, not too much arm, but just sort of waving like this. It's like bouncing a ball. And the stick should be the equal height. Now let's take a real quick look at the tradition of excellence starting pages for our percussionists. So we're going to turn to page number 4 in our percussion book. And if you'll notice, there are really 2 page 4s. This is for mallet percussion. And then there's another one, if you'll notice right there, right below it. Hang on, back up just one more time, I should just say. If you'll notice right below it that there are the snare drum. And there's multiple page 4s. And in every case, the mallets and the snare drum will have exactly the same rhythm so that they can concentrate on a rhythm study rather than having to concentrate on both rhythm and pitch in the case of our mallets. I'm going to ask to turn over real quickly to page number 6. And as we turn over to page number 6, this is the full band page. If you can see, we're going through multiple pages 4 and 5. And there we are, page 6. And what I'd like to have us do is scroll down so we could see exercise number 1. My friends and colleagues, I think that we have inadvertently been teaching students that a whole note only gets 3 counts, excuse me. And that's because, as so many books that I've seen have tick, 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 tick. And the students play only and they release on the fourth tick. Tick, 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 tick. That's only 3 counts. So in what we've done in tradition of excellence here is we've now gone tick, 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 and so they can release on beat number 1 of the fourth, beat number 1 of the second measure, holding it a full 4 counts. So with that, I want to now shift gears to teaching music reading, and we could take any one of the books, but I'm going to just pick a trumpet book just because I know that's Rob's major instrument, and so we're going to pick the trumpet book. If you'll notice, we just scroll down from the conductor's score, and you can access all of the books from the conductor's score. And what I'm going to do is go to page number 6. Now, what this is I want you to be aware of that the whole book is written on something called sound before symbol. They hear it, they see it, and then they apply it. Now, as we take a look at this, and we're on page number 6, a full band page. Now, how I teach this, notice it shows the fingerings and so on and so forth. We've even got a counting and conducting. Everything is done through a process, as I said, sound before symbol, hear, see, apply, but it's counting, clapping, singing, playing. Count, clap, sing, and play. Counting is obviously critical, but in and of itself, it's incomplete. They have to feel it. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing. If I'm doing a whole note on number 1, I would then find the starting note, and I'd go 1, 1. If you'll notice what I did here is I counted, and I would actually write the counting in below there, and I would write in 1, and then in parentheses I would go 2, 3, 4, and then when the whole rest, because I want them to feel it. Then I would ask them to do the same thing, but I wouldn't demonstrate it. I asked them to do it on their own. Remember, sound before symbol, they hear it, see it, they apply it. Rote teaching models everything, where sound before symbol only models that which they have not yet learned. So once we're gone through the whole note, we're going to move on to the very next page, and we're going to go to page number 7. And on page number 7, we're going to introduce them to the concept of half notes and half rest. So we introduce that on page number 8, and so I would go 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 3, 1, and so on and so forth. But here's the critical point. In order to make this work, sound before symbol, and in order to get students to be able to read music, the next exercises have to have exactly the same rhythm. So take a look at exercise 8 and 9. So then I'll say to them, once they've done exercise 8, I'll have them count, clap, sing, and play. And so what I'll do then is I'll ask them, give them the starting note, count, clap, sing, and play. And you know those notes, of course. Those were the first notes we learned. And then same thing is number 10, count, clap, sing, and play. Then we move on to the very next page where we introduce quarter notes and quarter rests. And if you'll notice here that on exercise number 14, and obviously this is a rhythm study, and so we're going to put the rhythm and counting and all of those things in there. And so I would actually have the students write in the counting on this exercise, and they can do that just through their IPS, where they can write on their pages on their IPS and the digital copies. And I'd have them go, I would count it like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and so on and so forth. But then take a look at the next two exercises. The next two exercises have exactly or almost exactly that same rhythm. So consequently, I only will introduce the quarter notes and quarter rests, for example, on exercise 14. Then the students apply it by asking them to write in the counting, clap the rhythm, sing before you play. And then, of course, the next denomination after quarter notes would be, we'd move on to eighth notes, and I think that's on page 14 if I recall. And so we're going to turn to page number 14, and on page number 14 we introduce eighth notes. And how I introduce eighth notes to the students is through subdivision. And so I'll ask them, I have clap, 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 clap. Half the band can claps and goes. Clap. Other band, follow me kids, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Switch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then they would write in the counting on those particular exercises. So they would count 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, counting is critical, but it's incomplete. They must clap the rhythm. They must sing it, and I like to have them sing it on if it's a like instrument class, I'll have them sing it on note names like E, 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 E. If it's a mixed instrument class, I use solfege. Me, 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 and so on and so forth. Until then, they have a feeling of what it feels like. That comes back to one of the greatest music educators of all time, and that's Emile Jacques Delcroze. Then we must apply it. So exercise 44 has them doing exactly that same rhythm on notes that they already learned. 45 has the eighth notes on 4, then a song with eighth notes on 4. And then we come to their test line with eighth notes on 3 and 4. Then we move over to the next page. And on the next page, we find that we got eighth notes on 2 and a song with eighth notes on 2. Eighth notes on 1 in case of exercise 51. Eighth notes on 1 and the song Now Let Me Fly. And then there's a sight reading challenge. And the sight reading challenge is what they're going to do there is ask them to draw in the bar lines and then clap the rhythm, sight read it. And the difference in the sight reading is in the recordings, we don't provide the melody. The kids have to work that on their own. And then Rio con Brio is an exercise with eighth notes and all beats of the measure. Now, having said that, we've talked a little bit about getting a good sound, getting sight reading going, articulation. But you know, one of the things I think that we can learn from what we've all experienced, and that is the business of COVID-19 and the challenges of teaching with that. Excuse me, just a minute. Is that I was always challenged when I was teaching full time. I was always challenged with how could I give the kids all the stuff that they really needed to do. Now, because of what we've done here on Tradition of Excellence, we can now enhance their education by that. So I'm going to ask my friends to turn in the trumpet book to page 25, number 97. Would you please? And as they're turning to that in the trumpet book, 97, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this little song by Bach. We're going to have a brief business of the of his history. We can notice there's a little microphone where they can record. Students can record their own performances and turn it in. And then let's take a look at the stars, shall we please? And notice we're going to give you additional information, history and culture, the history and culture of that particular song. And then what we're going to do with that is notice that we can now simply go to the top of the page, and you can press on a little symbol up there, and it'll take us to a quiz. And the quiz that we're going to turn to is actually found, because we grouped them, put them in groups. Click right there, and notice how that will take us right to a quiz. And so I don't have to take rehearsal time. I can do it by having the students do it at home. They can write right on this using the writer that's provided in the interactive practice studio. One last thing that I like to do is I like to give the students master classes. And so for that, we're still in the trumpet book, but one of the things I want to be able to do is do a master class. And I don't have to show it to the whole band. I can say, trumpet players, I want you to take a look at page number 8, and let's number 18. And I could have them do it online and ask them to write some of the things that they learned from this. So for example, number 18 is their first use of the third valve slide. So let's take a look, a video on it, shall we? Notice that we're just clicking on that little video
Third
cam.
valve slide technique.
Certain notes on a trumpet will naturally be more out of tune than others. In this video, you will learn how to make one of those notes play in tune. Certain valve combinations are out of tune on the trumpet. One of the most out of tune is the valve combination 1 and 3, which sounds very sharp. That note is low D. Extending the third valve slide makes the trumpet longer, which lowers the pitch and allows low D to be played in tune. To play low D, extend the third valve slide approximately half an inch.
I think we've made the point on that. And so that could be done as a master class for your trumpet students only. Another master class might be with your clarinet students. And so what I would ask them, we're going to open up the clarinet book, and we're going to go to page number 10, exercise 35. And I should just tell you, as we're preparing to do this, that I went through every instrument and found what I consider to be challenges, and then we did videos. In book 1 alone, there are over 200 videos, teaching videos like this. Well, one of the first challenges that a clarinet player would address was having to roll their finger from E to A. But let's have a professional clarinetist teach that lesson. So we're going to click on the video cam.
Finger roll to A.
Playing certain notes requires a clarinetist to roll the left index finger from covering the tone hole to pushing down the A key. In this video lesson, I'll show you how to do this. The rolling technique must be used when you play from E to A or A to E. Watch my left index finger to see the proper rolling technique. If the first finger is lifted up instead of rolling to the new position, an extra note will be played.
I think we've all heard that plenty of times. And so let's stop it there. But I also want to show we want to extend that lesson. So we're just going to go down to the bottom of the page. We're going to click on the arrow there. It takes us right back to Mastering Excellence, page 38, number 1. And there you can see we show it in 3 forms. This is called what we call differentiation in education. There's a basic preparatory exercise, an advanced preparatory exercise, and a mastering exercise. And all of those when you have the accompaniments and all of the songs in the book, or anytime you see a speaker, you can alter the tempos simply by clicking on them. So for example, and I use that as part of my grading system. So if they can play at what we call the normal tempo, then I call that an A. They have to play it perfectly because I believe in mastery education. they have to play it perfectly, they'll get an A. If they can't play it perfectly quite at that tempo, I slow it down one notch. If they can play it perfectly at that tempo, that's a B. Or slow it down one more notch, and it's a C grade. And what we have found is that students are always saying, look, I think I want to try it a little faster, a little faster. And obviously we're getting them to practice more and more and more and more. So all of the techniques for all of the exercises have been prepared in this way. So for example, it might be slurring on trombone, it might be flute octave shifting, it might be crossing the break and various alternate fingerings. For saxophone, it might be the alternate fingerings. The oboe might be which F key do I use? Diatonic or fork F for that? Bassoon flick keys. I mentioned the third valve slide on trumpet. Trombone alternate positions, and in percussion, the demo of both multiple bounce and open double stroke rolls for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your attendance. I will entertain some questions if you have them. Rob, how are we doing on questions?
Yes, we do have some, Bruce. So let me start with a couple of flute questions. Question that, do some students have lips or mouths that just really don't work for flute?
Yes, and that's true. If they some kids will have trouble covering their upper teeth. Sometimes we call that there's a shorter upper lip. There's a short distance between their nose and their upper lip. If they can't adequately form that nice shaped, remember, like I said, an American football shape, then they're going to have a lot of difficulties. And the other problem is some kids have what is referred to as a pendant. They'll have a bump right here, and that what happens there, then the air comes out in stereo. So I've got to make sure that I check those students very carefully. I do another clinic, and maybe that's for another time. I do a clinic on how to match students to instruments, which I think could be helpful at another time.
Sure, sure. Another flute question just to do with, and I'm sure this is a challenge that all people who author method books have to deal with, but why you start the flutes on the note D and then descend, because it gets the fingering complexity is increased there.
Yeah, you're speaking now of a standard of excellence.
Okay.
And in standard of excellence, we chose to do that, and again, that creates one of those challenges. And if people want to know the difference between standard of excellence and traditional of excellence, on the back of the handout, we've prepared a comparison. Whereas on tradition of excellence, the notes are D, E flat, F, which then don't require that so-called break between the D and the C.
Right, very good. And then a trumpet mouthpiece question. The comment is that, a lot of times people just take whatever mouthpiece comes with a trumpet and just assume that's going to be the best fit for a student. The question comes, some people have been seen to try to go to a smaller mouthpiece to try and help them get the higher register more easily. Do you have a point of view on any of that?
Absolutely. And really, let's talk about how do we get kids to play higher, and that really has to be that the buzz has to be faster. There has to be an equal balance between the pressure, the so-called pressure against the lip, and the air speed of the air. And so I start the kids on a 7C, the equivalent of a 7C. But then you say, well, how then do you increase the volume? It's done through lip slurs, where we strengthen these facial muscles like this. Again, using the swizzle stick to strengthen these facial muscles, and then consequently, little by little, they'll do it, and that's the only way they're going to be able to play higher. Also, too, remember the position of the tongue, and there's videos in all of the brass books. O, A, E, A, O are relative pitches of where the tongue is shaped in order to do that. O, A, E, A, O, again, to strengthen, to put it in their tongue in the right place to play higher and lower notes.
Okay, great. And then a question more to do with rhythmic reading, which probably affects obviously every instrument. If you've got some students in an ensemble who are already pretty good rhythmic readers, the question is, do you give them something else to focus on or whatever while you're trying to fix the rhythm of the other students?
Well, I mean, I think what would you want them to do if you're in a group setting, you don't want to give them anything else to do because that'll be confusing. But if you want to have them give more advanced studies privately, in other words, this is another great place in the back of the Tradition of Excellence book. There's rhythm study after the rhythm study, every rhythm that they'll ever encounter in that first year for book 1, every rhythm in book 2, and so on and so forth. But you're going to want to have them do that and then put their recording of it into the portfolio and send it to the teacher.
Great.
But again, when you're all in the same room, you don't want to have any distractions. They're going to have to reinforce one another, and kids learn from their neighbors too.
Right. I think that's all of the questions we got. We got some comments thanking you for a wonderful session. I'd just like to add my thanks too. Just wonderfully, so much detail in a short period of time to really help us get kids started well, which, as we all know, is really key to their future success. So thank you so much, Bruce. And I'm sure if you could see and hear everybody, you'd be hearing a lot of virtual applause. But no, thank you all for all who've joined us for this. And once again, thanks, Bruce, for just a wonderful presentation. A reminder that the video will be available, will be emailed to the folks who have registered, so you can review and look back at stuff again. So
if I could say one last thing, Rob, I would like to thank Aboda and Chose again, and thanks to all you who are attending, and thanks for all you do for helping kids to enjoy music and the process of music making. So kudos to you, bravo, thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye.